In July 1969, a volatile mix of migration, land reform, and nationalistic fervor culminated in the 100-hour war, a brief but brutal conflict between El Salvador and Honduras that left thousands dead and displaced over 100,000 people. Decades of demographic pressure saw thousands of Salvadoran campesinos migrating into Honduras seeking agricultural work, yet the 1969 Ley de Reforma Agraria effectively stripped these laborers of their land, forcing a mass exodus that pushed both nations toward the brink of war. President Fidel Sánchez Hernández of El Salvador and President Oswaldo López Arellano of Honduras presided over militarized regimes, both utilizing the escalating tensions to distract their respective populaces from severe domestic economic crises and internal political instability throughout the late 60s. Geographically, the conflict centered on the border regions, specifically targeting the Honduran departments of Nueva Ocotepeque and Choluteca, while the Salvadoran capital of San Salvador and the Honduran capital of Tegucigalpa became primary targets for strategic aerial bombardment campaigns. The spark occurred during the 1970 FIFA World Cup qualifying matches in June 1969, where riots erupted in Tegucigalpa and San Salvador, providing the necessary pretext for military mobilization after years of simmering resentment over border disputes and immigrant treatment. On July 14, 1969, El Salvador launched a coordinated offensive, with the Salvadoran Air Force striking Toncontín International Airport near Tegucigalpa, while ground forces simultaneously surged across the border to seize strategic positions within Honduran territory during the opening hours. The momentum shifted on the map near the border town of Nueva Ocotepeque, where Salvadoran ground forces encountered unexpected resistance, forcing a tactical stalemate that prevented a deep penetration into the Honduran interior and exhausted the Salvadoran military's limited logistical supply lines. Technologically, the conflict was defined by the use of aging piston-engine aircraft, specifically the Goodyear FG-1D Corsairs and Cavalier F-51D Mustangs, which were repurposed for combat, alongside civilian C-47 transport planes that dropped grenades by hand onto enemy positions. On July 16, 1969, the Honduran Air Force launched a retaliatory strike against the Ilopango Air Base in El Salvador, marking the final instance in history where piston-engine fighter aircraft engaged in direct aerial combat to secure regional air superiority. The human cost was devastating, with estimates suggesting between 2,000 and 6,000 total deaths, the vast majority being civilians caught in the crossfire, while the subsequent refugee crisis saw over 100,000 Salvadorans forced to flee their homes in Honduras. International intervention arrived swiftly as the Organization of American States invoked the Rio Treaty, exerting immense diplomatic and economic pressure on the Salvadoran government to cease hostilities and withdraw their occupying forces before the regional conflict could further destabilize Central America. By July 17, 1969, the war reached a point of total deadlock, as Salvadoran forces occupied Nueva Ocotepeque but lacked the necessary fuel and ammunition to sustain their offensive, while the Honduran military successfully neutralized the initial Salvadoran aerial advantage. The endgame arrived on July 18, 1969, when the Organization of American States successfully brokered a ceasefire, ending the active fighting after exactly 100 hours of combat, though the underlying political and social tensions remained largely unaddressed by the temporary truce. Under the terms of the OAS-brokered agreement, El Salvador formally agreed to withdraw its troops in early August 1969, provided the international community could guarantee the safety and rights of the remaining Salvadoran population residing within the borders of Honduras. Casualty estimates remain difficult to verify, but historical records indicate that approximately 2,000 to 6,000 people were killed in just 4 days, creating a humanitarian catastrophe that required years of international relief efforts to manage the displaced refugee populations. The geopolitical landscape shifted significantly as the conflict effectively destroyed the Central American common market, halting trade between the two nations for over a decade and leaving the contested border regions in a state of legal limbo for many years. The long-term legacy of the war included the intense militarization of both societies, which historians argue served as a direct precursor to the brutal Salvadoran civil war that would ravage the nation from 1979 until the peace accords of 1992. Ultimately, the 1969 conflict serves as a stark reminder of how political manipulation of sports and national identity can escalate into open warfare, highlighting the dangers of using external scapegoats to resolve internal economic failures and deep-seated social grievances. Beyond the battlefield, the conflict revealed the fragility of post-colonial borders in Central America, where arbitrary lines drawn on maps often ignored the historical reality of seasonal labor migration and the complex, intertwined lives of the local peasant populations. Both the Salvadoran and Honduran air forces faced extreme maintenance challenges, as the aged fleets of Corsairs and Mustangs required constant mechanical improvisation to stay operational, reflecting the limited resources available to these nations during the height of the Cold War. The formal resolution of the border dispute did not occur until the 1992 International Court of Justice ruling, which finally awarded the majority of the disputed Bolson's territory to Honduras, ending decades of uncertainty following the initial 1969 military clash. Today, the football war remains a cautionary tale about the volatility of nationalism, proving that even a game can become a catalyst for tragedy when it is weaponized by regimes desperate to maintain control over their own fracturing political systems.